Sophia Chen never planned on becoming a CEO. That wasn't the dream she had as a little girl, sitting at her family's modest kitchen table, watching her mom count coins from a glass jar to pay that month's bills. But life has funny ways of pushing us toward paths we never saw coming. Growing up in a small apartment in Seattle's Rainier Valley, Sophia was the kind of kid who noticed everything. She noticed how the bank teller's smiles would fade slightly when her parents approached the counter. She noticed how her father, despite his engineering degree from back home, would straighten his posture and carefully practice his English before walking into Pacific Northwest Trust, their family's bank since arriving in America. "Remember, always keep your bank book neat," her mother would tell her in their native language. In America, how they see your money is how they see you. As a teenager, Sophia started handling the family finances. She had a natural head for numbers and, more importantly, didn't stumble over complicated financial terms in English. By 16, she was the one accompanying her parents to important meetings, translating banking jargon and quietly observing how differently the staff treated customers depending on how they dressed or spoke. College applications were a blur of scholarship essays and financial aid forms. When the acceptance letter from Wharton arrived with a full scholarship offer, her parents threw the first party Sophia could remember in their small apartment. Neighbors crowded in, bringing homemade dishes and congratulations. Her father made a tearful toast: "My daughter will never have to bow her head to anyone at a bank." Those college years shaped Sophia in ways she never expected. While other students complained about 8 a.m. classes, she was already up at 5:30, working remote customer service jobs to send money home. She kept her bills in meticulous order, maintained a perfect credit score, and graduated with honors despite working 30 hours a week. After graduation, Sophia landed a job at a mid-sized tech company. The salary seemed enormous compared to what her parents had ever made, but she lived as if she was still on a student budget. She shared an apartment with 2 roommates, brought lunch from home, and saved aggressively. Every month, she'd walk into the local branch of Pacific Northwest Trust, the same bank her family had used for 20 years, and deposit another chunk of savings. "You're quite the saver," the teller would sometimes remark, clearly impressed by a young professional with such discipline. "I'm building something," Sophia would reply with a small smile. By night, she taught herself coding and studied business models. The idea had started small, just a frustration with how complicated banking was for people like her parents. Why couldn't financial services be more accessible, more human, more fair? As Sophia moved up through different tech companies, the idea grew. She filled notebooks with interface designs that would make banking less intimidating. She created algorithms that could assess creditworthiness beyond the traditional metrics that disadvantaged newcomers to the financial system. At 29, she became the youngest product manager at a financial software company. At 30, she received her first patent for a simplified authentication system. At 31, she turned down a promotion because she knew it was time to build something of her own. The night before her 32nd birthday, Sophia stayed up late, putting final touches on her business plan. Her apartment was quiet except for the occasional ping from her laptop. On her wall hung a single-framed photo, her family standing proudly in front of their first apartment in America 20 years earlier. Tomorrow, she would walk into Pacific Northwest Trust, not as the daughter of immigrants, not as a regular customer with an impressive savings account, but as a future CEO seeking funding for a company that could change the financial landscape forever. She saved the document, closed her laptop, and took a deep breath. All those years of watching, learning, saving, and planning had led to this moment. Tomorrow would be the first day of building her dream, a financial technology platform that would welcome everyone to the table. Little did she know that tomorrow would also be the day that would set her on a collision course with the very institution she had trusted for 2 decades. Sophia woke up on the morning of her bank meeting filled with a mix of excitement and nerves. She'd been preparing for this moment for years. The business loan from Pacific Northwest Trust would be the final piece she needed to launch her company. She dressed carefully that morning, choosing a navy blue suit that was professional without being flashy. Her mother had always taught her that banks respected people who looked responsible with money. She double-checked her presentation materials, making sure all the financial projections were clear and her business plan was free of even the smallest error. Today's the day, she told herself in the mirror, practicing the confident smile she'd use when shaking hands with the loan officer. The Pacific Northwest Trust building had always felt imposing with its marble columns and high ceilings, but today Sophia walked in with purpose. She'd been coming to this same branch since she was a child, first holding her mother's hand, then as a college student depositing scholarship money, and later as a young professional with an impressive savings record. "I have a 10 a.m. appointment with Mr. Reynolds," she told the receptionist. "He's running a few minutes behind," the young woman replied without looking up. "You can wait over there." 20 minutes later, a man in his early 30s with a crisp haircut and an expensive watch finally emerged from an office. He glanced at his clipboard, looking right past Sophia before doing a double take. "Ms. Chen, I was expecting." He paused, leaving the sentence unfinished. "Yes, I'm Sophia Chen," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for meeting with me today." Mr. Reynolds gave her a brief handshake and led her to a small meeting room rather than his office. "So you're interested in a small business loan?" he asked, flipping through her paperwork without really reading it. "Yes, I'm launching a financial technology company," Sophia began, opening her laptop to show her presentation. "I've developed a platform that will make investing accessible to people who have traditionally been excluded from." "I see you're requesting $250,000, he interrupted, frowning at the number. "That's quite ambitious for a first-time business owner." Sophia had prepared for this. "I have 10 years of experience in the tech sector, including 3 years specifically in financial technology. My business plan projects breaking even within 18 months, and I have $175,000 in personal savings I'm investing as well." Mr. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, looking at her with a skeptical expression that Sophia had seen many times before, that look men sometimes gave when they weren't really listening. "The tech sector is extremely volatile," he said, as if explaining something to a child. "And frankly, financial technology is already a crowded space with established players." "If I could just show you my market analysis," Sophia started. "Ms. Chen," he interrupted again, "starting a business isn't like working for one. The failure rate for startups is very high, especially for first-timers." Sophia felt her cheeks getting warm, but kept her voice steady. "My credit score is 815. I've been a customer here for 20 years. The collateral I'm offering exceeds the loan amount by." Mr. Reynolds closed her folder. "I just don't think you have the experience necessary for a venture of this scale. Maybe you should try something smaller. Or perhaps find a co-founder with more." He searched for the right word, credentials in the industry. In that moment, Sophia realized he hadn't really looked at her business plan at all. He'd made his decision before she'd even walked through the door. "The loan committee would never approve this," he continued, glancing at his watch. "You might be getting in over your head here. Tech is a tough world, especially for someone trying to break in at your level." The meeting had lasted less than 15 minutes. As Mr. Reynolds walked her back to the lobby, he added what he probably thought was helpful advice. "Maybe try again in a few years when you have more experience. Or perhaps consider a male co-founder. Banks tend to look more favorably on teams rather than solo founders." Sophia nodded politely, thanked him for his time, and walked out into the bright morning sunshine, clutching her rejected business plan. The same bank where she'd faithfully deposited every paycheck for years had just told her she wasn't good enough. Not experienced enough, not credible enough. As she waited for the bus, she pulled out her phone and made a call. "Lisa, it's Sophia. Remember that venture capital firm you mentioned, the Winnan-led one? I think I'd like that introduction after all." She took one last look at the imposing bank building behind her. Someday, she thought, they would regret this day. Not because she wanted revenge, but because they had missed out on something big, something that was going to change everything. The rejection from Pacific Northwest Trust lit a fire in Sophia that burned away any self-doubt. That same evening, she sat in her apartment, surrounded by sticky notes and laptop screens, reworking her pitch. If one door had closed, she would find another way in. "This isn't just about me anymore," she told her roommate May, who watched her working furiously into the night. "It's about every person who gets judged before their ideas are even heard. Sophia reached out to Lisa, a former colleague who now worked at Horizon Ventures, a venture capital firm founded by women who had faced similar barriers in their careers. When Sophia walked into their offices 3 days later, the difference was immediate. Instead of a cold meeting room, she sat at a round table with 3 investors who actually read her materials ahead of time. "Walk us through how your platform would help someone like my mother," said Diane, the lead investor, whose own parents had immigrated from Vietnam. She's lived here 30 years and still feels intimidated walking into a bank. For 2 hours, Sophia explained her vision for FineEquity, a platform that would use artificial intelligence to match people with financial services they qualified for, but in plain language anyone could understand. No jargon, no intimidation, no judgment. Banks look at traditional credit scores, but there are so many people who pay their bills perfectly on time but don't have the right kind of credit history, Sophia explained. "My system looks at overall financial stability patterns instead." When she left the meeting, she had something the bank had refused to give her, a chance. 2 weeks later, Horizon Ventures called with an offer, $500,000 in funding, twice what she had asked from the bank. "We believe in you, and we believe in this," Diane told her over the phone. "Now go build something amazing." The next year passed in a blur. Sophia rented a small office space and hired 4 people to help build her platform. They worked long hours, testing and refining the software. There were nights when Sophia slept on the office couch, too tired to go home, but too determined to stop. When FineEquity launched, it started small. Sophia herself would sit with early users, watching how they interacted with the platform, noting their confusion points, and making adjustments. Her first customers were people from her parents' community, people who had always felt that financial services weren't designed for them. "This is the first time I've applied for anything and not felt stupid," an elderly man told her after using FineEquity to find a retirement account that matched his needs. "Your computer asks questions I actually understand." Word spread, first slowly, then like wildfire. A financial blogger tried FineEquity and wrote about how it had found him a better mortgage rate than his own bank had offered. A popular YouTuber made a video comparing FineEquity's recommendations to traditional banks, showing how much money users could save. 6 months after launch, Sophia's user base had grown to 50,000 people. After 9 months, it hit 150,000. Major financial institutions started taking notice, calling with partnership offers that Sophia carefully evaluated. "We don't partner with companies that don't share our values," she told her growing team. "We're not here to help banks reach more customers. We're here to help customers find banks that actually deserve their business." By the 1-year mark, FineEquity had raised another round of funding, $8 million, that valued the company at $75 million. Sophia's team had grown to 28 people, carefully selected not just for their skills but for their belief in the mission. The office walls were covered with testimonials from users, people who had bought their first homes, started businesses, or finally paid off debt because FineEquity had connected them with fair financial services they never knew they qualify for. 18 months after launch, just as her business plan had projected, FineEquity broke even. The platform was now earning enough from referral fees paid by ethical financial partners to cover its operating costs. More importantly, it had helped over 350,000 users collectively save more than $42 million in fees and interest. When a reporter from the Wall Street Journal called asking to profile the company, Sophia almost said no. She had always been private, focused on the work rather than recognition. But her team convinced her that visibility would help their mission. "Let them tell your story," May urged, now working as FineEquity's community manager. "Let people see what's possible when someone believes in an idea." The article came out on a Thursday. By Friday morning, Sophia's phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from investors, potential partners, and other media outlets. But the call that made her pause came from an unexpected source, Pacific Northwest Trust, asking if she would consider meeting with their new head of digital innovation. Sophia smiled as she politely declined. "I'm afraid we're quite busy at the moment," she told the caller. "Perhaps in a few years, when you have more experience in this sector." She hung up the phone and turned back to her team, who was celebrating their newest feature launch. The bank that had once deemed her unworthy was now trying to learn from her. But Sophia wasn't looking backward anymore. She was too busy building the future. 3 years had passed since that humiliating day at Pacific Northwest Trust when Sophia walked into her downtown office and found her team gathered around someone's computer, all talking excitedly. "What's happening?" she asked, setting down her coffee. May rushed over, practically bouncing. "Forbes just released their Entrepreneur of the Year cover, and guess whose face is on it?" Sophia blinked in surprise. That can't be right. But there it was, her photo on the digital cover of Forbes, with the headline, "The Woman Changing How America Banks." The team erupted in cheers, hugging each other and taking selfies with the computer screen showing their boss's face. "We knew they were considering you, but they kept the final decision secret," explained Tom, her chief technology officer. "They interviewed 10 of us behind your back last month." Sophia felt overwhelmed. Just 3 years ago, she couldn't even get a simple business loan. Now she was on the cover of Forbes. Her parents would be so proud. "This isn't just my achievement," she told her team, who now numbered over 100 people across 3 offices. "This is what happens when we all believe in something bigger than ourselves." The Forbes recognition opened doors Sophia hadn't even known existed. Invitations to speak at conferences flooded in. University business schools asked her to give guest lectures. Other entrepreneurs sought her advice. At a global banking conference in Singapore, Sophia found herself on stage sharing her vision for the future of finance. In the audience sat executives from the world's largest banks, including, she noticed with slight amusement, 3 people from Pacific Northwest Trust, frantically taking notes. "Financial services have traditionally been designed by people who already understand finance," she told the packed room. "At FineEquity, we design for people who don't. That's the difference." Back home, FineEquity continued to grow. Their offices now took up 2 full floors of a downtown building. The company was valued at over $2 billion, and their user base had expanded to over 4 million people worldwide. Sophia made sure the company stayed true to its values. They hired people from diverse backgrounds, not just as a policy, but because it made their product better. Every new feature was tested with real users from different communities. Customer service was handled by real people, not just chatbots. "We're not just a tech company," she often reminded her leadership team. "We're a human company using technology to solve human problems." Meanwhile, across town, Pacific Northwest Trust was struggling. Their quarterly reports showed declining customer numbers for the 8th straight quarter. Their mobile app was rated 2 stars in the App Store. Younger customers were leaving in droves, moving to more innovative banks or platforms like FineEquity. In the executive boardroom of Pacific Northwest Trust, tension filled the air as the bank's CEO, Richard Wilson, faced an increasingly frustrated board of directors. "Our market share has dropped 13% in 3 years," said one board member, pointing to a chart with a clear downward trend. "We're losing customers faster than we can replace them." "The technology investments haven't paid off," added another. "We spent $30 million on that new system, and customers still complain it's confusing." Richard wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "We're implementing changes as quickly as we can, but—" "Not quickly enough," interrupted the board chairwoman, an older woman who had been with the bank for decades. "Our competitors are eating our lunch, especially that FineEquity platform. Even my own grandchildren use it instead of their account here." The room fell silent when she mentioned FineEquity. Everyone knew the story, how the bank had rejected its founder years ago, a decision that now seemed catastrophically short-sighted. "Perhaps it's time for new leadership," the chairwoman continued, looking directly at Richard. "Someone who understands where banking is headed, not where it's been." 2 days later, the announcement hit the financial news. Richard Wilson was stepping down as CEO of Pacific Northwest Trust after 5 years at the helm. The bank's stock dropped 7% on the news, as investors worried about the future of the struggling institution. The bank's board formed a search committee, hiring an elite headhunting firm with clear instructions: find someone who could turn things around. Someone who understood technology and financial services. Someone innovative. In her office, Sophia was reviewing plans for FineEquity's expansion into Canada when her assistant knocked on the door. "There's a call for you from Bailey Roberts at Executive Search Partners," she said. She says it's confidential and important. Sophia took the call, listening more than speaking as the headhunter explained that a major financial institution, she wouldn't name which one yet, was looking for a new CEO. They specifically asked about you, Bailey explained. They're willing to offer a very competitive package. I'm flattered, but I'm not looking to leave FineEquity, Sophia replied. We're just getting started. Before you decide, let me send over some details, Bailey insisted. This institution has a long history and tremendous resources. With the right leadership, your leadership, it could transform the industry. Sophia agreed to look at the information, mostly out of curiosity. When the email arrived an hour later, she opened the attachment and nearly spilled her tea when she saw the name at the top of the document, Pacific Northwest Trust. The same bank that had once deemed her unworthy of a small business loan now wanted her to run the entire operation. Sometimes, life's ironies were almost too perfect. Sophia stayed at her computer screen for a long moment, reading the proposal from Pacific Northwest Trust over and over again. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same bank that had dismissed her business idea without even properly reviewing it now wanted her to run their entire operation. She picked up her phone and called the person who had always given her the most honest advice. "Mom, you're not going to believe this," she said when her mother answered. "What is it, sweetheart? Is everything okay?" Sophia couldn't help but laugh. "Remember that bank that wouldn't give me a loan? Pacific Northwest Trust? They just offered me the CEO position." The line went quiet for a moment before her mother burst into laughter too. "Life has a funny way of coming full circle," she finally said. "What will you do?" That was the million-dollar question. Sophia decided to at least hear them out. She agreed to meet with the bank's board, curious about what they would say. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at the bank's headquarters. This time, Sophia wasn't led to a small meeting room. Instead, she was escorted to the executive floor with its plush carpeting and expensive artwork. The boardroom had a magnificent view of the city skyline, a stark contrast to the cramped space where Mr. Reynolds had dismissed her dreams years ago. "Ms. Chen, thank you so much for coming," said Dorothy Wells, the board chairwoman, extending her hand. "We can't tell you how excited we are to meet with you." The other board members nodded eagerly. There were 9 of them, all in expensive suits, all suddenly very interested in what Sophia had to say. "I admit I was surprised by your call," Sophia said, taking a seat at the head of the table, a symbolic position they had clearly arranged intentionally. "We're in a period of transition," Dorothy explained. "Banking is changing rapidly, and frankly, we haven't kept pace. Your work at FineEquity has been revolutionary. We need that kind of vision here." Sophia listened as they outlined the position. The salary they offered was eye-popping, 4 times what she currently paid herself at FineEquity. There were stock options, a seat on the board, a corporate apartment, and even a car and driver. "You'd have complete authority to reshape our digital strategy," one board member added eagerly. "Our technology is, well, it's outdated. We know that. And our customer base is aging," said another. "We're losing younger clients to platforms like yours. We need to adapt or we won't survive the next decade." As they spoke, Sophia glanced around the room. She wondered if any of these people knew that this very bank had rejected her loan application. Did they realize the irony of begging her to save them now? "May I ask why you're approaching me specifically?" she asked. "There must be many qualified executives with banking experience." The board members exchanged glances before Dorothy answered. "Traditional banking experience is exactly what we don't need right now. We need someone who understands where finance is going, not where it's been. Your success speaks for itself. FineEquity has accomplished in 3 years what most financial institutions couldn't do in 30. Sophia nodded, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the satisfaction she felt. "And what would happen to FineEquity if I were to accept this position?" "That would be entirely up to you," Dorothy replied. "Though we would hope to explore potential synergies between our organizations in the future." Of course they would, Sophia thought. They were hoping she would bring her successful platform with her and save their struggling bank in the process. "This is certainly a generous offer," Sophia said carefully. "I'll need some time to consider it." Of course," Dorothy said quickly. "Take all the time you need. We're prepared to wait for the right person." As the meeting wrapped up, one of the board members walked Sophia to the elevator. He was older than the others, with kind eyes that seemed genuinely apologetic. "I hope you'll consider our offer seriously," he said. "Between us, this bank needs someone like you. We've been stuck in old ways of thinking for too long." Sophia smiled politely. "It's interesting how things change. 3 years ago, your loan officer told me I didn't have enough experience to run a small startup. Now you want me to run an entire bank." The man looked genuinely surprised. "You applied for a loan here?" "I did, for the seed money to start Finequity. I was told I was getting in over my head and should try again when I had more experience." "I believe the loan officer also suggested I find a male co-founder to give my application more credibility." The board member's face fell. I had no idea. That's terrible and embarrassing for us." "Water under the bridge now," Sophia said as the elevator arrived. "But it does make your current offer rather ironic, don't you think?" Back at Finequity's offices, Sophia called her leadership team together. She valued their input and wanted their perspectives before making any decision. "They're desperate," Tom said after Sophia explained the situation. "Their last quarterly report was disastrous. They're losing customers and their technology is at least 10 years behind the times. It's a sinking ship," added May. "They just want you to bail them out." "But think of the resources they have," another team member pointed out. "Their problem isn't lack of money, it's lack of vision. With you at the helm and their resources behind you." Sophia listened to everyone's thoughts. Later that evening, she sat alone in her office, looking out at the city lights. The bank's offer was tempting in some ways. It would be a form of validation, proof that she had been right all along. But something about it didn't feel right. Taking over Pacific Northwest Trust would mean leaving behind what she had built. It would mean trying to change an institution that had resisted change for decades. As she was thinking, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her mother. "Remember why you started Finequity in the first place? It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about helping people who were ignored by banks like that one." Sophia smiled. Her mother always knew exactly what to say. She had started Finequity not to compete with banks, but to create something entirely new, something better. That's when an idea began to form in her mind, one that would change everything. 3 days after meeting with Pacific Northwest Trust's board, Sophia still hadn't given them an answer. The headhunter called twice, leaving increasingly anxious messages. The bank was getting impatient, which only confirmed what Sophia already suspected. They were in worse shape than they were letting on. "I've made my decision," she told her leadership team one morning, calling them into the conference room. "I'm not taking the job." Thank goodness, Mai sighed with relief. It never felt right. But Sophia continued with a small smile. "I do have another idea, something bigger." She walked to the whiteboard and wrote 3 words, Finequity Banking Division. "Wait, are you serious?" Tom asked, leaning forward. "You want us to become an actual bank?" "Not exactly," Sophia explained. "We won't become a traditional bank, but we will offer banking services through partnerships with smaller, more progressive banks who already share our values." The team listened intently as Sophia outlined her vision. Finequity would create a banking division that would offer checking accounts, savings accounts, and loans, all with the same user-friendly approach that had made their investment platform so successful. "The big banks think people need them," she said, drawing a diagram on the board. "But what if we showed people they have better options? What if we built something that combines the security of a bank with the innovation of Finequity?" "This is brilliant," said Aisha, their chief operating officer. "We'd be competing directly with them, but without all the overhead and regulations of becoming a bank ourselves." "Exactly," Sophia nodded. "And I know the perfect location for our flagship physical center." She pulled up a map on the screen showing a vacant retail space in a gleaming glass building directly across the street from Pacific Northwest Trust's headquarters. The team broke into laughter as they realized what Sophia was planning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making a statement that would be impossible to ignore. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Sophia turned down the bank's offer with a polite email, giving no hint of her real plans. Her team worked around the clock, securing partnerships with 5 regional banks who were eager to be part of the new venture. They designed a space that looked nothing like a traditional bank. No telewindows, no roped-off lines, no imposing counters to separate staff from customers. Instead, the flagship center would have comfortable seating areas, clear information displays, and staff trained to speak in plain language about financial products. We need to show people what banking could be like if it were designed for them, not for bankers, Sophia explained to the architects. 4 months later, with construction well underway, Sophia decided it was time to make their plans public. Rather than a simple press release, she organized an event that would get everyone's attention. On a sunny Tuesday morning, curious onlookers gathered outside the building across from Pacific Northwest Trust headquarters. A large sign covered in blue fabric hung above the storefront, clearly hiding something big. News crews set up cameras, alerted by a press release promising a revolutionary announcement in consumer banking. From their offices, employees of Pacific Northwest Trust pressed against windows, wondering what was happening. Some even came downstairs to join the growing crowd. At precisely 10 a.m., Sophia stepped onto a small platform. Wearing a simple blue dress rather than a typical banker's suit, she looked nothing like the traditional image of a banking executive. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. 3 years ago, I walked into a bank with a dream and was told I didn't have what it takes to succeed. She didn't name Pacific Northwest Trust, but everyone in banking circles knew the story. Today, I'm here to announce that FineEquity is launching a new division that will change how people think about banking forever. With a nod, 2 staff members pulled down the fabric, revealing the sign, FineEquity Banking, Financial Services for Humans, by Humans. Applause broke out as Sophia continued. Our online platform has already helped millions of people navigate the complex world of investments. Now we're bringing that same approach to everyday banking. She explained how FineEquity Banking would offer accounts with no hidden fees, loans with transparent terms, and customer service provided by real people who spoke like humans, not financial textbooks. We believe banking should be accessible to everyone, not just those who already understand the system. We believe financial institutions should work for their customers, not the other way around. As she spoke, workers unveiled the glass front of the new center, giving people a glimpse of the modern, welcoming space inside. It was a stark contrast to the cold, imposing facade of Pacific Northwest Trust across the street. "We'll be opening our doors in 30 days, Sophia announced. And for the first 1,000 customers who open accounts, we'll make a matching donation to community education programs, teaching financial literacy." The crowd cheered, reporters fired questions, and photographs flashed. Through it all, Sophia maintained her composure, answering questions with the same direct, jargon-free language that had become FineEquity's trademark. Across the street, Pacific Northwest Trust executives huddled in an emergency meeting. Through the boardroom windows, they could see the commotion. The bank's stock had already dropped 3% since the announcement just 90 minutes earlier. "She planned this," one executive said, watching the crowd across the street. "She timed it perfectly." Dorothy Wells, the board chairwoman, looked out at the scene with a mixture of admiration and dismay. "She's not just competing with us," she said quietly. "She's making us irrelevant." Back outside, as the event wound down, a reporter asked Sophia the question everyone was wondering. "Is this revenge against the bank that rejected you?" Sophia smiled and shook her head. "This isn't about revenge. It's about showing what's possible when you build financial services around people's needs, not around tradition. The world doesn't need another bank that works the way banks have always worked. It needs something better." As she stepped away from the microphones, Sophia caught a glimpse of Mr. Reynolds, the loan officer who had rejected her years ago, watching from the edge of the crowd. Their eyes met briefly. He quickly looked away and hurried back toward the Pacific Northwest Trust building. Sophia didn't feel anger seeing him again. Instead, she felt something unexpected, gratitude. If he had approved her loan back then, she might have built a smaller company. His rejection had forced her to think bigger, to find better investors, and ultimately to create something far more revolutionary than she had originally planned. Sometimes the biggest obstacles lead to the greatest opportunities. And now, she was about to change banking forever. 1 year after FineEquity Banking opened its doors across from Pacific Northwest Trust, the financial world watched in amazement as the story played out like a movie. FineEquity's banking division had grown explosively, opening 15 locations and attracting over 300,000 customers, many of them former clients of traditional banks. Meanwhile, Pacific Northwest Trust was in serious trouble. Their stock had fallen so low that financial analysts were using words like acquisition target and distressed asset. 4 board members had resigned. Customers were leaving in droves, many walking straight across the street to FineEquity. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Sophia sat in her office reviewing quarterly reports when May rushed in without knocking. "You need to see this," she said, placing her tablet on Sophia's desk. The screen showed a breaking news alert. Pacific Northwest Trust seeks buyer amid continuing losses. Sophia read the article carefully. The bank had officially put itself up for sale after posting 6 consecutive quarters of losses. Several larger banks were rumored to be interested, primarily for the real estate holdings and remaining customer accounts. "What are you thinking?" May asked, studying Sophia's expression. Sophia leaned back in her chair. "I'm thinking about how things come full circle." That evening, Sophia called an emergency meeting with her leadership team and the company's major investors. For hours, they debated the possibilities, the risks, and the opportunities. By midnight, they had reached a decision. 2 days later, Dorothy Wells, still holding on as board chairwoman of Pacific Northwest Trust, received a call she never expected. FineEquity was making a formal offer to acquire the bank. The negotiations were intense. For 3 weeks, teams of lawyers and financial experts from both companies worked through the details. The banking industry buzzed with rumors and speculation. Would the upstart fintech company really buy one of the city's oldest financial institutions? Finally, the terms were agreed upon. FineEquity would acquire Pacific Northwest Trust for a fraction of what the bank had been worth 3 years earlier. The announcement sent shockwaves through the financial world. On the day the deal was finalized, Sophia walked into the grand lobby of Pacific Northwest Trust, no longer as a loan applicant, but as its new owner. The marble floors and imposing columns no longer seemed intimidating. They just seemed outdated. As she toured the building, employees watched nervously. Everyone had heard the stories about how this bank had once rejected her. Many assumed she was there to gloat or to start firing people. Instead, Sophia gathered everyone in the main lobby. Standing on the stairs so everyone could see her, she addressed the anxious crowd. "I know many of you are worried about your jobs," she began, her voice echoing in the marble hall. "So let me start by saying this. Good people who care about customers will always have a place in our company." A visible wave of relief passed through the crowd. "But I won't pretend nothing will change," she continued. "Things will change because they need to. Banking has operated the same way for too long, and that's why so many people feel excluded from the financial system." She outlined her vision for transforming the bank into something that combined the stability of a traditional institution with the innovation and accessibility of FineEquity. "We're not here to tear everything down. We're here to build something better, and we need your help to do it." As she finished speaking, a man approached hesitantly from the crowd. Sophia immediately recognized Mr. Reynolds, the loan officer who had rejected her application years ago. He looked older now, tired and worried. "Ms. Chen," he said, his voice slightly shaky, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about how I treated you back then. I was wrong, obviously wrong." The lobby had gone quiet, everyone watching this unexpected moment. Sophia could have dismissed him or responded coldly. No one would have blamed her. Instead, she smiled gently. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "But you know what? That rejection was probably the best thing that happened to me. It forced me to find a different way forward." She extended her hand, which he shook with visible relief. "Now," she continued, addressing him but speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I have a question for you. What do you think we can do to make sure no one with a good idea gets turned away just because they don't fit some traditional mold?" The question caught him off guard. "You're asking for my opinion." "I am. I need people who understand the old way of doing things to help build the new way. Sometimes knowing what doesn't work is just as valuable as knowing what does." That conversation became the first of many as Sophia worked to transform not just the bank's systems but its culture. Rather than firing the old guard, she paired longtime bank employees with Finequity team members, creating task forces to reimagine every aspect of the bank's operations. 6 months after the acquisition, the old Pacific Northwest Trust building had been transformed. The imposing teller windows were gone, replaced with open consultation areas. The confusing forms had been simplified. The jargon-filled brochures had been rewritten in plain language. But the most significant change wasn't physical. It was in how the staff approached their work. Loan officers were now trained to look beyond traditional credit scores, considering alternative indicators of financial responsibility. Customer service representatives were encouraged to take time with people who needed extra help understanding their options. At the grand reopening ceremony, Sophia invited her parents to cut the ribbon on the renovated building. As cameras flashed, her father whispered, "You didn't just prove them wrong. You showed them a better way." A year later, a young woman walked into one of Finequity's branches with a business plan for a community health startup. The loan officer listened carefully to her idea, asked thoughtful questions, and worked with her to strengthen her application. When the loan was approved, the young entrepreneur asked, "What made you take a chance on me when other banks wouldn't?" The loan officer smiled. "Our founder has a saying, sometimes the people who don't fit the traditional box are exactly the ones who will think outside of it. We're not just looking for safe bets, we're looking for good ideas." In her office overlooking the city, Sophia Chen hung a framed rejection letter on her wall, the one Pacific Northwest Trust had sent her years ago, not as a reminder of past hurt, but as a symbol of how obstacles can become opportunities when you refuse to let other people's limits define your potential. The story of the rejected loan applicant who ended up owning the bank became legend in business schools and startup communities. But for Sophia, the real success wasn't in the acquisition or the growth or even the recognition. It was in creating a financial institution that welcomed people who, like her parents many years ago, just needed someone to look past assumptions and see possibilities.